What's up, YouTube fan? This is your girl, Lauren Denise, host of This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief. Maybe this is your first time here, maybe not. Either way, welcome or welcome back. On this episode, we're going to be talking to Justen DeBowles, licensed professional counselor. We're going to be talking about why it's so important to go to therapy during your grieving process. And actually, we just talked about why it's important to go to therapy, period, whether you are on the right track, the wrong track, or in between. Therapy is important. And so this is part one of our why it's important to go to therapy during grief episode. And so we dive into so many different topics on this when we talk about how important it is to go to therapy during your grieving process. If you want to go to therapy with someone, how to be able to talk to them about that, what therapy can do for you, even if you're on a good path in life, and talk about maybe some different ways in order to take accountability, how to use I statements. So many gems dropped. I cannot wait for you guys to hear. Make sure you leave a comment at the end of the episode. Let me know your favorite part, and I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. Welcome back, my loves. Welcome back to another episode of This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief. This is your first time here. Welcome. Thank you so much for joining. If you are rocking with me on this journey, thank you so much. If you are watching me on YouTube, hey. If not, you can hear my voice. Thank you again so much for joining. So today we're going to be diving into a topic that I love, that is something that seriously helped me when it came to my grieving process, and that is therapy. So this is actually going to be a two-part episode. I'm going to be bringing on our resident counselor, as I call him, Justen DeBowles, LPC. I'm super excited to have him back. If you haven't, he was on episode 3 of season 1 of This Too Shall Suck podcast. And we were talking all about coronavirus and all of the craziness that was surrounding that. And so I'm super glad that he's back to talk about therapy. And then I'm going to be bringing on a female therapist to talk about it from her perspective as well. So I am just really excited to kind of be doing this 2-part episode. And I hope you guys love it. And I hope you guys are just as excited as I am. And so, I always like to start with some statistics when it comes to, before we get into the interview or anything like that. So I actually have my other computer up here. So if you're watching me, you see me looking this way, it's because I'm looking at my other computer. And so I found some statistics when it comes to like therapy and mental health, because again, it really helped me a lot when I was going through the grieving process, just to kind of like, I guess, share my journey on therapy when I was going through the grieving process with my dad. So, as you guys know, my mom passed away in 2015 from breast cancer, and then my dad passed away in 2019 from bladder cancer. And so after my dad passed away, it was right around the holidays. It was in August, so it was getting close to the holidays. And I started noticing that I wasn't processing it well, that I was getting upset with my friends for things that they weren't even like really doing. Like they would go out and I would be at home on the couch because I couldn't go anywhere. Like, cause I was literally just like in a dark place, and I would just want them to come, but I wasn't able to like vocally express that. And so I knew at that time, like, hey, you probably need to go talk to somebody because you're getting upset with them, but you can't like really express your feelings, or you're going to lash out at them when you, again, haven't even expressed what is wrong. Like, how are they supposed to know what's wrong if you don't even tell them something is wrong, right? And so I knew, like, at that point, I had to go and get some help and seek some help, because I knew the holidays were coming up, and I just knew it was not going to be a great situation. And so I actually got a referral from one of my girlfriends, and she referred me to this therapist. And, when I walked in there on the first session, I was like, I'll be fine. And I just like, nah, like I just lost it on there. Like I just lost it on the couch, and just immediately all of these feelings of guilt and shame and all of this started coming up. Right. But it was, God, it helped me so much, especially doing it during the holidays. Like it was exactly what I needed. And so I am a super advocate for it. I did it for, I think I started in November, and then I did it until maybe like January. And then I didn't do it for maybe like 4 or 5 months. And then I started back up again, maybe like June or July or something like that. Because I knew it was, I needed, well, no, it might've been longer than that. I think I stopped in like maybe February, and then I went all the way through the summer. And then I think I started back up in the fall. And I knew it was important for me to, just get a therapist who looked like me. You know what I mean? Like, my therapist is great. I think she helped me through, not I think, I know she helped me through that dark place and helped me get out of that dark place of grief and help me pull me out of that space and to be able to process it and have the tools to process it. But I knew I needed another therapist who looked like me, who I can have the conversation with, and she understood what it meant without me having to go into like super detail about it, right? Um, and that second time that I went, like, I don't want to say anything was like specifically like wrong, or I wasn't like really like hardcore grieving like I was, but I knew I just kind of needed to just like have an outlet and be able to talk to somebody because I was starting this podcast and I was working and trying to figure out like what my next move was. And so I knew I wanted to have an outside source to help me kind of navigate all of these different things that were happening in my life and help me bring them together and to have the tools necessary to be able to do that. And so she helped me a lot. You know, she helped me all the way up until I moved. I think I had like a session with her right before I moved. And, you know, anytime I go back to Georgia, I'm like, hey, girl, you know what I mean? Like, so it is helped tremendously. It's helped me a lot. And so that's why I wanted to have this conversation and really, you know, just bring some light and some space to a topic that people don't talk about. People assume that therapy, you have to go to therapy when something's wrong, or you have to go to therapy. You know, I'll say specifically in the Black community, like, we just don't do it. It's just not something that we do. It's not something that we talk about. And so I knew it was important to talk about that as well when we're going into it. So I just wanted to read some statistics. Like I said, if you're watching me on YouTube, then you'll see that I'm looking at my computer over here. But these are actually from the Mental Health America. So the website is mhanational.org, and they always do a state of mental health in America, which I think is super dope. And so they did one for 2021. And so I'm just going to read some of the key findings. You can download the whole report. I'll make sure that I put this in the show notes, this link, so you can see it. But some of the key findings is that youth mental health is worsening. So in 2021, 9.7% of the youth in U.S. have severe major depression compared to 9.2% in last year's data set, which is crazy. That's really, it's actually, let me not say that. It's not crazy because they were in the middle of a pandemic trying to go to high school and do all those other things that they were not able to do, and they didn't have an outlet. So actually, not even surprised by that statement. Another one is there's still an unmet need for mental health treatment among youth and adults. Again, also not surprised because we don't talk about it. So we're not having a conversation. People are not putting mental health. Let me stop there. People are being more conversational about mental health these days, I think, because of the pandemic. Even before the pandemic, like, we were starting to have that conversation, but really since the pandemic, like, mental health, people are talking about mental health. We are talking about like being depressed. We are talking about going to therapy. We are talking about going to therapy for our marriages and things like that. So we are being more vocal about it now, but there's still a large unmet need because it's not up here like so many other things that are going on in the world. So again, not surprised by that. And this one as well, not surprised by this. The percentage of adults with a mental illness who are uninsured increased for the first time since the passage of the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare as they call it. So, you know, that's something that Justin and I talk about in the interview, is about like insurance and, you know, therapy and what goes into that. So again, not surprised by any of these. Another one is the number of people looking for help with anxiety and depression has skyrocketed. And again, coming off a pandemic, none of these key findings surprise me because we were literally in the middle of a pandorama. Okay. So none of these surprise me because people were locked in the house. They didn't have any outlets. So again, go back and listen to season 3, episode 1. Justin gives some good tips on, like, you know, how to work around that. But then we're in the house, we're trying to figure it out. We're being like stuck with our emotions. And then you throw us back out here into the world and you're like, I hope everything's okay. No, people have anxiety. People are scared about not wearing masks. People are scared about the vaccine. People are scared about just being around people. Like, hello? Of course the number has skyrocketed because you take us out of like normalization, then you throw us back out there and tell us to figure it out. Like, no, thank you. No. Again, not confused by any of these key findings here. And again, this kind of piggybacks off the first one. Young people are struggling most with their mental health. And this is something that Justin and I talk about a little bit as well, is like our generation. I'll say, like, you know, just millennials in general. And even the younger generation, like the conversations we're having are like, listen, like this is my mental health. This is what's happening in my world. Like, this is what's going on. Right. And so, we're just trying to figure it out. And we are more open to having the conversations about it than obviously our parents and our parents' parents and things like that. But we still are struggling with that. There's a lot of like generational trauma, that we're trying to unpack. And it's just probably not going to get unpacked in our lifetime, but we're doing the best that we can. And then the last thing, again, it's not even confusing. It's not even surprising. People screening at risk for mental health conditions are struggling most with loneliness or isolation. I feel like this is a 2021. Oh, it is 2020. I was gonna say this cannot be 2021, but April to September 2020. Okay, I was about to say now. All right, I was gonna say people outside with it since they got the vaccine. So I'm like, that's not true. But this is one. While rates of anxiety, depression, and suicidal ideation are increasing for people of all races and ethnicities, there are notable differences in those changes over time. Black and African American screeners have had the highest average percentage change over time for anxiety and depression, while Native American and American Indian screeners have had the highest average percentage change over time for suicidal ideation. So again, there's just a lot of trauma that comes within being Black, being Black in America specifically. Obviously, because that's my experience. I'm not saying that being Black elsewhere does not have the same trauma, because I have friends everywhere, and it's just a different type of trauma, like generationally, right? So I'm not surprised that we have a higher percentage of depression than other races would. Same thing with Native Americans having a higher percentage of suicidal ideations, right? Because they also have trauma as well. And if you're listening and you're not Black or Native American or anything else, I'm not saying that you don't have trauma. I'm not saying that your community is not going through things. That's not what I'm saying at all. What I'm saying is these numbers aren't surprising to me. Being a Black woman in America, I had a whole episode. You can go back on season 1 called Black is the New Grief, just talking about it. And it's a storybook. I call it a storybook. Honestly, it wasn't even a regular episode. I call it a storybook of just different stories from people who were all going through, like it happened around the George Floyd time. And so just the different conversations and different stories from Black men, Black mothers, white allies, white wives, like just, a therapist, just all of the conversations. Right. And so, like I said, I just wanted to give some of those statistics, of what's going on in America, the 2021 state of mental health in America. And like I said, I'll definitely leave the link in the show notes because it's actually really good. So I would definitely say, like, if you have the time to go through it and just really like see where you're at, like where your mental health is at. Right. And so we are going to get into this interview with Justen. I'm super excited to have him on again. So we will be right back. All right, guys, welcome back. As you can see, I'm super excited to have, I call him my resident counselor because I always tell him, like, I'm always calling him like, Justen, hey, it's me again. Need to have you on. So as soon as I knew I was talking about therapy this season, I already knew I had to bring Justen back for part 1, because we are doing 2 parts because it's very important for us to talk about therapy. So we're going to have Justen on, and then we're going to have a female therapist on, because if y'all want to play and act like you don't want to hear a man, that's okay. I got a female going on too. So we're going to do it all. So I'm going to read a quick bio, and then we're going to get straight into it. Justen DeBowles, a graduate of Morehouse College in downtown Atlanta, not Georgia State, has a strong love for the African American community and his mental stability and health. After graduating college, he sought his graduate education and received a Master of Science in Psychology at Auburn University, Montgomery in Montgomery, Alabama. Since returning from graduate school, he has worked at various mental health agencies, serving the community by doing both in-office and in-home sessions. He chose this path to ensure that he stayed close to his community in their element. He has worked multiple years at a mental health hospital, helping individuals recovering from both mental disabilities and substance addiction and abuse. He describes the hospital environment as a true test to determine if the counseling and mental health field is really for someone or not. After years of supervision, he received his LPC in the state of Georgia in 2016 and spent some time learning under others how to operate a private practice before finally opening his own in the summer of 2019. Since then, he has been continuing to serve his community both in their homes and in his office. offering counseling and therapy to men, women, children, and families with a strong devotion to the African Americans and minorities. He aims to help people learn to become the best version of themselves by helping their minds, help their behavior, which can impact their environment and community. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome back to the show, Justen DeBowles.
Oh, man. I still like how that sounds.
Every time you hear it, right, you're like, is that me?
I'm like, man, I did that. Okay.
Okay, popping just a little bit. You popping just a little bit.
You know what? I'll take that. I'll take that. Thank you.
Yeah, just a little bit. You know what I'm saying? Give yourself a little. What the kids say? Dust your shoulders off. Well, I guess that was like us. Dust your shoulders off. Justen, thank you for coming back again. Last time we were on audio, and now look at us in a full little situation here. You know what I'm saying? So
they can see all of this and what I look like. Oh man,
see all the glory of it all. So this is what Justen looks like, everyone. If you're on YouTube, this is what he looks like. If you're listening, go to YouTube and you'll see what he looks like. So, of course, like I said, I wanted to bring you on to talk about therapy. And so, God, there's so much to dive into. I don't even know where to begin. But obviously, it talked a little bit about your journey of therapy in your bio. But what made you get into, because I think we cut that out of the bio. So, because I wanted to ask this question, but like, what made you get into the mental health field and decided to become a licensed professional counselor?
So growing up, my father was always kind of big on, my father was in computers and in IT. So that's always been a love of mine. It's technically still is. The computer we're recording this from my end is one that I've built. So I'm really big on IT and computers. But my senior year of high school, I ended up taking a psychology class. And at the end of the class, I'm thinking, man, I love this. Like I love learning about technology, but my God, I love learning about people on another level. And so after that, I said, well, I'm gonna go to college and I'll still mess around with computers, but let me see what this psychology thing is all about. Never look back. Never look back. Absolutely loved learning what makes people tick way more than I learned what makes any computer or any machine tick.
Come on,
people are just infinitely more fascinating.
I believe it. I like that. What makes people tick more than what makes computers tick? Y'all hear that? Bars. Call him Justen DeBowles. I was trying to think of like a rap name, but JD. Oh, we already got a JD. Sorry, I gave it a valiant effort, but that was a good one. So let's JD, not to be confused with Jermaine Dupri. Okay. So did you say same height?
Mm-hmm.
I cannot. I'm not about to play. So let's get into therapy. And I'm coming out the gate heavy with it. Why in our community, I'll say specifically in the Black community, why is it such a big thing for us not to want to go to therapy? Where did that come from? Is that like a historical thing? Is that just something that's been passed down from generations? Because you got the crazy uncle and you only go to therapy if you're crazy. Like, where did that come from?
Okay, so you said you're going right out the gate with the heavy stuff.
Coming out the gate with it.
Well, when you think about there's a couple of reasons as to why. The first one is we tend to be a very close-knit community, especially Black people. So as a result, we tend to keep stuff very much in-house. We're good for us either sweeping stuff under the rug or stay within the family, stay within the house. You don't take family business outside of the home. It's something most of us have probably heard. Well, so take that and then coupled with who are typically the therapists that you see. Most of the old classical therapists that even we learn from, when you look at them, they're all primarily Caucasian men and women from various parts of Europe for the most part. So think about growing up if you grew up in the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, when psychology was really kind of getting going. And think about the relationship between white people and Black people at that time. We're not going to go talk to a therapist.
Right.
We're going to go. Matter of fact, we're going to go do what grandma and grandpa and great grandma told us to go do. We're going to go pray. We're going to the church. to the pastor, a trusted elder in the community, someone else. We never really looked at therapy because we were never really seen as the therapists, if that makes sense.
Yeah. No, that's
and
good.
so we just never. It wasn't until more Black people started getting into this field that more Black people started to get into therapy as a whole.
So speaking of that, I think that's really good. I think you made a good point. Like you said, when we don't see someone who looks like us, there's certain things we don't do. And so that's why I always think it's so important to have representation when it comes to that. And even I'll say even still, like my first therapist was an older white woman, and she helped me a lot during my grief. But then as I progressed in my, I'll say my therapy journey, I knew I wanted someone who looked like me, who could understand my experiences and me not have to necessarily explain what it means that when I go to work and wear my natural hair, somebody's like, oh my God, like, is that your hair? Can I touch it? Like, I don't want to have to like explain, you know what I mean? Like, and I'm not saying that she wouldn't understand that, but like, how can you understand that? Right? Like, because you don't go to somewhere and somebody doesn't ask to touch your hair. That's just not a thing. Right. So I'll say for our generation, I think it's really interesting. What do you think made our generation so like, such an advocate of mental health? Because our parents were not. Like, let's just be clear. Like you said, like we keep things in the family, or like, that those things that happen in the family that everybody knows about. The uncle who did this to that person, or the auntie who did this, or the cousin who did this. Where do you think that came from in our generation that made us be like, no, we need to like go to therapy, break the generational curse? Because clearly our parents was not out here telling us to do that.
You started to hit that nail directly on the head, even in your question. The shortest way to answer that is by saying it all eventually added up, and it was just too much for our generation to bear. I have to quickly give a shout out to my homeboy, who was also a Black male therapist, Jared Washington. He actually wrote a book that comes out later this summer, and it talks about what's known as intergenerational trauma. And so looking into that, especially in the Black community, these traumas that have been passed down and they became just ways that the family operates, they keep adding up and adding up and adding up. And eventually it got to our generation and we're like, look, we can't handle these things anymore. We're starting to fall apart. The rates of suicide, the rates of homicide are increasing. You're looking at people that just can't cope with the things that are going on in their world. And so all of this stuff is just consistently added up to where we even look at just ways in which we were raised growing up and things that our grandparents did. And looking back, you realize, well, that wasn't healthy. But that's all they knew. That's all they knew, because that's what great grandma did. And that's what great grandpa did, and so on and so forth. And so these traumas, eventually, they always get passed down to the next generation through certain behaviors. And we're at the point now where we're just kind of tired of it. So we're trying to unpack some of those things. It's a journey. It's a long journey. And I would love to say it'll be unpacked in my generation, but I honestly think it'll even be past my own children's generation. It's a lot to unpack. We're looking at hundreds of years of trauma that has been done, especially to the Black community, that we are trying to undo.
Yeah.
And it takes time.
Yeah. No, that's real. You said intergenerational trauma?
Intergenerational trauma. Yes, ma'am.
Oh, I'm gonna have to get that book when it comes out.
I will definitely get them. I'll get them in touch with you.
Yeah, because I'm like, yeah, we're gonna have to come on here, sir. Let's talk about this intergenerational trauma that's been going on forever. So specifically, obviously, you know why we're here to talk about grief. So specifically, again, like I told you, had my first therapist when I was in the thick of grief. Why is it so important for someone who is going through that grieving journey, whether they are in the thick of it or whether they're, kind of on the quote unquote other side of it? Why is it important for them to reach out to a therapist or counselor to talk to them about it?
Well, what makes that so important is what grief, in my opinion, what grief does to the mind. So when a person is grieving, when a person's going through that severe emotional trauma that comes with a form of loss that can incite that grief, it impacts our ability to think, let's say, clearly, right? And so if you are isolated kind of by yourself and you're going through this grief alone, chances are you're not thinking with as clear of a mind as you typically would. And so it helps to have somebody completely on the outside of your family unit and your friends unit, who are very important still. For those that know me, I definitely push, have a good support network. But it helps to have someone outside of that who can help you look at some of the behaviors or some of the thoughts and emotions that you're having to really process some of these things. For example, the loss of a loved one, typically, of course, will lean on family members, but they're also going through that grief.
Mm-hmm.
So they're also dealing with the thought process and their own attachments that have probably been broken as a result. So it really helps to have somebody on the outside who is trained to help you start to understand these emotions and really process and put some things together for you when you're going through this grief, because grief can definitely impact the person to start having thoughts that you wouldn't normally have. It can take you to places that you don't think you've ever been to before.
Yeah. Yeah. It could definitely take you to some very, we'll just say dark places.
That's the best way to describe it.
Yeah. Just some very dark and alone places. But I think I love that you said like getting an outside perspective of helping you understand those emotions. Because obviously losing, my parents, like at the time, like going to my siblings or going to whoever, not even going to anyone, I was like, I didn't know how to, I don't want to say control my emotions, but like grief was really taking over. Like I was lashing out, I was doing things, I was upset with people, but was not able to express why I was upset with them. And that's when I knew, like, you cannot do this alone. Like, you cannot do this alone. But so when I think about that, like I said, I think about, we'll just talk about therapy in general. Like for someone who is grieving, and again, they may be in a really beautiful space. Like right now, I feel like I'm in a good space, but I am an advocate of therapy, and I was just sharing with Justin, like coming here to Ohio and kind of being in my space by myself. Like when I go back to Atlanta, like I'm already telling my therapist, like, girl, I need about 2-3 sessions that week. Hello. So, but for somebody who's like, well, I'm in a good space, like I'm not in that like heavy part of the grief. Is it something that I even need to do? Because I think it's almost a twofold question, right? Like we could talk about the grieving part of it of like, I'm kind of in a good space to grieve. I don't feel like I need to talk to anyone about it. But even people who are like, you know what? No, let's just start there. Because that's a whole nother question that I just thought of. No, we're just going to stop there with that one.
Okay. So thinking about your question, what if you're in a good space? Let's say you're not making unhealthy decisions. You're just feeling that sadness and you feel like, I don't need to take it to anyone. I don't need to, I'm understanding what's going on. I'm just feeling really down. Honestly, I would say it's a toss up at that point. You might be okay without talking to a therapist because you're not processing the grief therapeutically, but you are going through the steps of grieving that you have to go through. So feeling that sadness, that's perfectly normal, right? That sadness, that anger, even some of the lashing out, that's expected throughout the grieving process and throughout the stages. So that's normal. I would strongly recommend a therapist when these things start to impact your ability to function in society. Whatever your functional role in society is. So if it is you're a caretaker for somebody, you're a parent to kids, if you're an active participant in your job, whatever it may be, when it starts to negatively impact these things, then it would help to get a therapist, just someone to start to talk to about this. But and I don't want to say light because I'm not trying to minimize the grieving process, but if you are just having sad days, having bad days, having days when you're angry, that's perfectly normal. That's okay.
Yeah, no, that's good. That's good. So to piggyback off that, that's why I wanted this to be like a separate question, just like a general therapy. I feel like people assume that something has to be wrong for you to go to therapy. Why is that such I don't want to say the wrong answer, but the wrong answer?
So it's almost like only going to your doctor or only going to see your doctor or to get checkups when you're sick. A lot of times something could have already deteriorated to the point to where it's too late.
Yeah.
So I would tell people, don't go get couples and marriage therapy on the brink of divorce. At that point, it's too late. I would recommend you get that when you all are starting to have early difficulties, or even if you all are doing fine and you just want to have some discussions that you feel, hey, a helpful third party might be useful in this moment. Maybe I'm missing something. Maybe she's missing something. You see what I mean? So
Yeah.
it helps to still just get that extra opinion.
Yeah.
From someone who's trained to look for those opinions.
Like a little tune-up.
Pretty much.
Like a little tune-up. Let's talk about that a little bit. I think that's an interesting dynamic. So, because I've read so many articles and things, obviously, just on grief and couples. You know, maybe somebody's lost. Maybe one of your spouse, significant other is grieving because maybe they lost someone, maybe they lost a job, you know, whatever it is, insert the grief, right?
Mm-hmm.
How does one partner support the other going through that? You know, and maybe, I don't want to say like gently pushing them into therapy if they feel like that's the answer, because you can't make anybody go to therapy until they're ready, right? But how do they support them in that? You know, if maybe it's like, do I have a conversation and say like, you know, maybe it's time to talk to somebody? Like, how do they go about that?
So again, in my opinion, I think the way that someone can approach that, sometimes just telling somebody, hey, go to therapy, you know, that can be very abrasive.
Right.
Especially in our community. That can be very abrasive.
So to go off.
Yeah, you say that, you've already, especially if someone's grieving and you tell them go to therapy, they'll probably assume that you have called them some sort of a wreck. And, you know, and now it's, oh, I'm that bad kind of situation.
Right.
I think that the best way to do that is just by offering support and space to that person. And by support, instead of saying, oh, you know, it gets better, or some of those phrases like that, which can help sometimes. But instead of just throwing those phrases out, really just ask that person, hey, I'm here for you. What do you need? And just keep offering that sort of support, that sort of thing. What I think will happen is in instances like that sort of natural support and willingness to actually be there for somebody, I think people really like that feeling. And so by offering that, you become, let's say, a very valued individual in that person's life. And eventually they will come to you and want either your advice or your opinion about what maybe they can do. The feelings may be getting too much. And in that moment, when you have that opportunity to offer that advice or to offer that opinion, that is when you can make the suggestion. Well, look, I'm just a supportive friend, but I think you could benefit from seeing a therapist just for a couple of sessions. So you don't have to throw it out immediately when that person's really in the thick of it.
Right.
Really just build your relationship with that person. Build your support with that person. And eventually they will come to you and ask.
Oh, that's
and you'll
good.
be able to make that suggestion.
That's good. That's good. So like create kind of that opening for yourself instead of like coming out the gusto like, you need help.
Yeah. Girl, you sad. You need to go see somebody. Boy, you tripping. You need to go see somebody. You know?
Right.
Boy, you angry at everybody. Go talk to somebody. Like, don't do that.
Right. And that's real. I was telling Justin, I have a friend who we talk all the time, and he came to me. I was like, well, why don't you go talk to somebody? Like, I got a great suggestion. The Black man. You talk to him, and he did. You know what I mean? But I think to your point, we had to get to a place where he even felt comfortable enough to share with me what he was going through, that I was even able to open to say, okay, maybe this is something that is like above my pay grade. Like you know what I mean? Like I'm not certified in this. I can give you my advice as your friend, but I think like, you know, we need to kind of elevate to the next level at this point about it. And so I loved it. That's absolutely great. Another thing that I was talking to somebody about, it's a touchy subject, relationships between, or I'll say estranged relationships between like parents and kids. That causes a lot of grief, just for people in general, especially like, you know, people don't think about it like on Mother's Day and Father's Day when you have these estranged relationships, but they're like, you know, I want to talk to my parents. I was just talking to someone's mother about this. And, you know, I was telling her, I was like, well, have you guys like tried to, you know, do like family counseling? She's like, she ain't gonna listen, you know? So like, how do you like, And I'll say on both sides. I don't want to say like just
Right.
like, I don't want to say just like the child trying to get their parent to go to therapy, but their parent trying to get their child. Like, how do you have that conversation we'll just start with the child trying to get their parent to go to therapy? Because again, we talked about our parents, they ain't going for it. Like, but I want this relationship. Like, how do you create that opening? Because I don't know.
Whew. Man, so this one is this can be tough. This can be tough.
Right.
It can
I
be
believe it.
done, but it is not easy, and it does rely on both people. That's also the thing. Anything involving therapy, the person has to want it.
Mm.
Anyone that's a participant in therapy has to want to be there in some degree. Either maybe they don't want to be in the room, maybe they don't want to have a session that day, but they want to get better. There has to be a desire. There is no magic button or switch that you can just make someone say, therapy, I should do. Like, generally someone has to want it. So starting with that, it is going to be difficult to encourage people from an older generation that wasn't raised with the value of mental health to suddenly cast things in their mental health office. That's tough for them.
Yeah.
But what I found that generation does value, let's say our parents' age, what that generation does value is family, even to a fault sometimes.
That's true.
So I've seen individuals in that generation come to therapy for the sake of saving their family. So I'm not saying hold that relationship that you may have with that older sibling or that parent hostage, but really put it out there of what you are struggling with. Bring it from your perspective. The one thing you don't want to do, and this is across the board, is tell people you. Well, you make me feel this and you make me feel this, because the person's going to get defensive. All communication is going to break down. So you can more so just explain how you have been feeling, what you have been thinking, and how valuable it will be to you if you would be able to talk to your parent and a therapist as well.
That's good.
Good. Instead of making it more of a, well, you were very harsh to me and you were very this to me, and that your parent's going to look for a lot of old parents, especially in the Black community. I gave you life. You're welcome. And conversation's over at that point.
That sounds about right.
Because accusations don't get much done.
Yeah. No, that's real. So something that I did learn in therapy is I statements.
Yes.
So, to piggyback off what you said is like, I feel that I have been treated harshly since when I was younger, or I feel that I wasn't heard when I was younger. Because can't nobody tell you how you feel, right? Like, how you feel is how you feel. So I don't want to say like a example, but I'm just trying to get people to understand, like, if they are in those situations, to use I statements. But when you say like so if somebody's hearing that, right, and they say, oh, well, if I'm like, Justin, I feel that you were being harsh to me in this situation. They're like, well, I wasn't being harsh. Like, how do you even wrangle that back in to say, like, I said, that's how I feel. Like, how do you wrangle that back in? Because I can imagine people are having these conversations all the time with whoever it is that they're going through.
All the time. So the key point about I feel statements is you really are just putting your emotion out there. So it stands to take some time to really think about what it is that you're feeling. So even instead of saying, I feel like you were harsh, which is an I feel statement, but you could say, how does that person being harsh make you feel? And through some digging, you might realize, okay, I feel attacked. You see what I mean? I feel attacked in this conversation.
That's a different conversation.
You see what I mean? So you get something differently than just putting I feel and then just still reverting back to a you statement. I've had to help direct people in therapy do that sometimes, because they'll halfway do it. They'll get the I feel and realize, okay, I'm bringing it from my perspective. I feel that you could do better. Well,
back to square one.
Right. It's like, okay. And so then we start back over with, no, how does what this person is doing impact your emotional state? And that's what the focal point has got to be.
Oh, that's good.
Because older generations do not want to lose younger generations.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's good. Just look, I'm over here like, have I done that before? Probably.
We all have. Trust me. I'm professionally trained. I'm guilty of this sometimes. It's hard not to do. Love my wife to death.
Right.
We've had countless conversations where we'll catch ourselves and realize we have both made statements like, well, you keep doing this. It happens. It happens.
Yeah, of course. Of course. No, that's good. I feel attacked. Listen, where are my notes at? I just want y'all to know y'all getting a free therapy session in here, okay? Justin's fees.
We having fun. We be having a good time.
No, that's good because I really like you said, I feel attacked in this moment. Like you feeling. Wait, look, see, I'm about to mess it up already. Dang.
That's okay. It pays to think before we speak about what it is we're really trying to get. That's the other thing. If the goal of this conversation between this younger and this older person is to get the older person to agree to therapy, I don't know how often in our own lives we've gotten somebody to agree to something by condemning them.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to go in not with anger, not with aggression, but you have to really kind of walk this person to something that you know they aren't really a big fan of.
Yeah.
You can't shame someone into therapy. That's just not a good idea.
Ooh, you can't shame someone into therapy. That's good, Justin. That's good. Because I always think about that. So like, I think you kind of touched on this, but I just want to, so if we're having a conversation, whether it's with the older person, spouse, whoever, right? And we want them to go to therapy and we're having the conversation, we're doing the proper I statement, and we get to a point that we get to a head, right? And it just goes to the left. Obviously, I know some things you can do is you can walk away and things like that. But what are some other tips for someone who may be trying to get someone to go to therapy, couples therapy, family therapy, whatever? What are some tips to kind of draw back the conversation if it does get to a point where, you may be completely calm, you're using I statements, you're doing all those things, but this person is just like knucking if you bucking. Like, what are some things that they can do to kind of reel it back in to maybe get it to steer it back on the right track?
So one of my favorite questions I like to give people to ask, this could be a significant other, a family member, a coworker, whatever it may be, is if you have posed something to that person and they have not, they're not receptive of it, they're completely against it for their own reasons, then I tell people, lean on the relationship you have with that person and use this question right here. Can you just trust me on this? Because when you ask that question, that person they have a dilemma in front of them now. Because if they say yes, then by answering that way, they have to at least give it a chance.
Yeah.
Because they said they trust you and this is what you would like to do.
Right.
If they say no, well, they have just identified a severe issue in you all's relationship, which is they don't feel they can trust you.
Yep.
So now, even if that person was trying to sort of downplay whatever problems may have existed, by them answering no to that, they have kind of just identified and put it right there in the forefront that, hey, there's a trust issue here. And that at bare minimum, that deserves some conversation.
Yeah. Ooh, I like that. Can you trust me on this?
Mm-hmm. Part of any relationship is being able to trust whoever the other person is, be it a friend, a family member. Part of any relationship is being able to trust that person. And if you cannot, typically there might be an issue. Listen,
Justin just gave y'all some game, okay? I'm about to be out here. Can you trust me on this?
Because, people have a tendency to try to control too much anyway.
Oh, so, for sure.
Yeah, it'll feel good to just say, yeah, and just go with that person. Take a load off.
Good. Oh, that's good, Justin. Ooh, that's good. So if you are like, it's going to the left and you need to bring it back to the right, can you just trust me on this? Because then, like you said, now we got to dive a little deeper. Now, whether they acknowledge that they have to dive a little deeper, whole nother conversation. But, you know, we'll get there.
Eventually.
Eventually. So something, oh my God, something somebody asked me specifically about therapy. I think they were talking about, I don't want to say it was pricing. It was something money wise. Like, why is it that, and I know that some therapy obviously is covered by, insurance and things like that. They're like, but why is therapy more often than not, maybe the therapist that you want more often than not covered by insurance than the ones that are? I don't even know if that's even something you can answer, but somebody did ask me that.
I can answer it somewhat. There is a shift right now in the therapeutic realm. I'm noticing it, especially in the African American community, where we are not. A lot of therapists aren't accepting insurance, and that's just due to the additional hurdles and everything that comes with that. In my practice, I don't accept insurance, but I do have a sliding scale rate, and I have a certain amount of slots that I offer that sliding scale rate for individuals that are in financial hardship or, whatever it may be. But at the same time, of course, people have to eat.
Of course. Right.
So it's really a bit of a fine line that both therapists and patients, Lord, and clients have to walk. Right. Because on one hand, if you want to help, especially the Black community, yes, we have bills we have to pay. Yes, we have to eat. However, I am a proponent at the same time, and me and my lovely business partner, we have had many discussions about this.
Right.
Where if I want to help my community, there are going to be times when we have to offer something that our community can not only afford, but that would be beneficial to us. We can't ignore the fact that financially as a whole, the African American community is, it's down there compared to some of the other communities.
Yeah.
So they don't have, and counseling has traditionally been a Caucasian majority type of science. So as we are getting into it, we also have to be aware of the populations that we are serving and what's actually possible.
Right.
Now, I know some therapists that charge in the 2s to 3s per hour, and they get it. Sure. I know some who stay within 50 to 100.
Right.
And I know some between 100 to 200. It just depends on what that therapist views themselves as, their own expertise, their own specialties, how long they've been doing it. All of that kind of goes into this. But I also do believe that there has to be at least a thought toward, okay, who am I trying to get in? Because if I'm trying to get in a certain population, I have to be aware that, okay, this population might have a lot of insurance. I probably need to get on an insurance panel, even if I don't want to.
Right.
Or this population doesn't have a lot of disposable income. Therefore, I'm going to have to really evaluate what price I want to charge for that population. And it's a lot of people don't like to say that. I know many therapists would disagree with me on that.
Of course, yeah.
But it's an opinion of mine that I've always had, that we have to really be able to serve our community. If that's our actual goal, in order to serve our community, we got to be aware of our community's financial obligations as well.
No, that's the truth. Because I think about, you can go to like a what is it, like a county services, like a health for your county services type deal. But I don't typically see anyone who looks like us in there.
Right.
So, maybe that's a whole nother conversation of like, do we as a people like get into those like, moments? Because again, like, people got to eat, they got to do what they got to do. But ain't nobody telling you to change your prices, because you got a whole family over there to feed. So,
Well, Lauren, that's why I do both. That's why 2 days a week I'm in my private practice. That one has the higher rate. That's more of the specialized things. And the other days of the week, I'm working agency work where I'm going into people's homes.
Oh, that's good.
Majority of these people have Medicaid. Some have Medicare. So I'm seeing them at home. I'm seeing them at the office of that agency.
Oh, that's
And
good.
I know for a fact those people, they couldn't pay my individual rate for my practice.
Of
And I'm not
course.
looking for them to. So I still do work with that agency to make sure I can still be in my community offering therapy to
Oh,
the
that's
people that I know probably can't afford it.
oh, that's good, Justin. I didn't know that. Shout out to you.
Mhm.
That's good. That's good. So if you're a therapist listening, you need to do that too.
It's a lot of work, y'all.
Right. Out here shaming Lord. Stop shaming people. No, that's good though. I didn't even know that. So learn something new about JD today. You know what I'm saying? Not to be confused with Jermaine Dupri. I'm gonna say that every time.
Same height.
That's gonna be the line. JD, not to be confused with Jermaine Dupri. Okay, Justen DeBowles. But my last question, because I think I have kept you long enough, even though this has been absolutely amazing. What would you say? What is the biggest, I guess, takeaway when it comes to someone thinking about going to therapy? Like, what would you say to that person who's like, well, I kind of want to go to therapy, but like, I feel like my friends are going to make fun of me or my family's going to say something or it's going to be like an issue. Like, what do you say to that person who's on the fence? And like, how do we get them over the fence of going to therapy?
So there's a couple of different ways that you can get to that. One idea is you can maybe talk to each friend, maybe not in a big public setting, but on an individual private basis. Y'all may be sitting down for dinner or something, and you can just say, hey, if this is a good friend of yours, by the way, it's a whole nother conversation. If this is a good friend of yours, you can ask them, hey, been thinking about going to therapy. Have you ever been, or do you know anyone that's been? Did they like it? Just to get an idea about not only that person's viewpoint of therapy, but if they are aware of any others that have, and they can give you that feedback. Another thing to get that person that's on the fence. I'm assuming if you know that person's on the fence, I'm not gonna say go ahead and push them, but it's more of a try one session, see if you like it.
That's good.
Try once and just see.
That's good.
Now, I'm not going to tell y'all to pay half of the session just because you think your friend need help. But if this person is ambivalent, this person's really, like this person's on the fence and you really think they should go, try to help in any way you can just to get them in the door.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, once they're in the door, it's up to the therapist to build that relationship. Even if you only have one session, it's up to that therapist to build that relationship. And it's up to that now client to decide whether they want to continue or if they feel that they can form a bond with that therapist. But if you know someone that's on the fence, be as supportive as possible. I preach support, y'all. Be as supportive as possible to that person, even in their exploration of debating whether or not they want to go.
Yeah.
There's a reason why they're on the fence. Right? So just listen, hear, be supportive to them.
Yeah. No, that's good. That's good, Justin. That's good.
People like support.
Not saying to push them on over, but
yeah.
Gently,
come on.
Gently, walk them on over the fence. But this has been great, Justin. Again, as always, thank you so much for being here. If the people want to get in contact with you, where can they get in contact? I know you're so open all the time with my listeners. I'm surprised I ain't blown up the phone. But
I'm telling you, it's so open.
Yeah, where can they get in contact with you at? All your socials, all your numbers, all your websites.
Ooh, okay.
He's like,
no, the easiest thing is I can be found at JustenDeBowlesLPC.com. That's the website, easiest way to reach me. In addition to that, I'm Justen DeBowles LPC on Instagram, on Facebook. If you type my first and last name, you might get to my regular Instagram or Facebook. I get inquiries there too, and not a problem. Again, I'm a pretty open guy. The phone number, 404-740-0400. Like it's easy to get in touch with me, guys. Just if you look me up, you'll find me. I'm not hard to find.
True. That's very true. And I'll put all his information in the show notes so y'all know exactly where he is. And he's very open, very kind. I mean, This is his really like third time because he's been on the live. Well, really like fourth time because he's been on the live
like
twice.
fourth, yeah.
Yeah, like fourth time. I'm like, you're our resident counselor, so help.
I'm with it.
No, he's always here. But thank you, Jay. I appreciate, excuse me, JD, not to be confused with Jermaine Dupree.
There we go.
Thank you again for being here. And I'm going to get into my wrap up, but I appreciate you.
Lord, you're very welcome. It was a pleasure being here.
Don't you just love JD, not to be confused with Jermaine Dupree? I tickle myself, guys, but no, honestly, that was, I mean, just absolutely amazing. You know what I mean? Just talking about so many different things from the intergenerational trauma to how you can kind of bring the conversation back, you know, things that I just knew that I was doing right that, you know, it's just a learning lesson to say, like, we can always get better, right? You know, you don't know what you don't know, and there's always ways to improve because I'm always looking for ways to improve when I'm having conversations with people because I'm a person of I don't like to get turned up. I will, but I really don't like I don't like to raise my blood pressure or anything like that. So to be able to have a conversation to say like, hey, trust me on this. Listen, that's gonna be my new line. Hey, trust me on this. But no, high key. But no, seriously. So if you are listening to this, and I hope that you got some good gems out of that, you know, of whether it's you being on the fence about therapy or having someone in your life who may be on the fence and now having some, you know, ways to kind of get them over the fence or, you know, having a conversation with someone to get them to come to therapy with you, right? You know, whether it's a couple, whether it's a family member, you know, whatever it is, like for you to be able to have the tools and the conversation and the words to be able to have that because it's again like I wanted to make this a two-part thing because it's really important like therapy as an advocate for therapy these days it's just super important to have especially when you're grieving like I literally remember those low moments when I was just like I was on the couch literally in the dark and I just was like I cannot anymore, you know, I can't do this, I don't know how to do this. And you know, thank God for friends who were going to therapy and were like, hey, I have a therapist. And I'm just going to be honest. And I'm going to, you know, talk to the next therapist about this when we have her on about finding the right therapist and what that looks like, right? Because for me, I think I called two therapists prior to finding the first one that I went to. And I was telling my girlfriend, she referred me to this one girl and I just didn't like her energy. You know, she picked up the phone. I'm in tears, right? And I just didn't like her energy. And I'm like, girl, I'm calling you crying and I don't like you over the phone. You think I'm about to come in public? Oh, no. And so it didn't work, right? And then I called like a grief counseling hotline and the lady, I was like, oh, see, so I'm trying to give it a valiant effort. But this lady, you know, my original therapist, just I loved her energy over the phone. She was just like understood where I was at and you know, she just worked with me. She met me where I was at. I think that's what's important is when you're going to find a therapist is to find a therapist that'll meet you where you're at, but you also have to be open as well. Like you said, you have to have just a little bit of want to go to therapy. Not a lot. You don't have to be like, ugh, like why am I here? But at the same time, like you have to want some type of change in your life and allow this person to help you with the tools for you to be able to change. And so, you know, if you are listening and you are on the cusp, like I said, and you are like, okay, well, you know, this opened up a little bit, or maybe you're listening and you're like, nope, you're both full of crap. I hope you listen to the next episode and maybe you'll get something from there and are able to open up and to have those conversations to say, you know what, maybe I do want to go to therapy. Maybe, you know, like you said, I'll go to one session and give it a try. You know, why not? You can go to one session with multiple therapists and, you know, until you find your one, right? Because you really have to get comfortable with this person because you're coming at the level of vulnerability that you have to go into therapy is really important. And I know a lot of people don't like to be vulnerable, especially men. And so that's why I wanted to bring Justen on, you know, as a man to say like, hey, like you can come into the situation, like be who you are, and I'm not going to judge you, and I'm going to work with you through it. And I make mistakes, and I am, trained to do this. Right. And so that's why I thought it was important to do that. But there has to be a level of vulnerability for you to go in there, to open up yourself, to be able to kind of peel back those layers. As I say, like, I feel like we're all kind of onions. We all have layers, and peel it back and to find out like what it is that you need in order for you to heal. Because that's the biggest thing, is when it comes to anything, when it comes to grief, you have to peel back those layers. You have to process it in order for you to heal, and to heal from it, and to get through it. Again, it's never get over. It's always get through. And so, as I always say, y'all know what I'm about to say. As I always say, as you're going through the journey, be kind to yourself and give yourself grace. Because if you don't, who will? Thank you so much, guys, for listening to another week's episode of This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief. If you haven't already, follow me on social media at This Too Shall Suck podcast on Facebook and Instagram. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, don't forget to rate, review, and follow. No longer subscribe. They've changed it to follow now. And make sure you share it with your family and friends. As always, this episode was produced by Mike Sick, and the original music was produced by Jimmy Samaj. If you'd like to send me a message, you can email me at hello@thistooshallsuckpodcast.com, or you can go to my website to learn more about Miss Lauren Denise, who I am, at thistooshallsuckpodcast.com. As I always say, thank you guys for listening. I'm sending you love and light in your life because you deserve it. I'll see you on the next episode. Mwah. All right, my loves, I hope you all enjoyed that episode. You can actually listen to This Too Shall Suck podcast, a fresh perspective on grief, on all listening platforms. And make sure, if you're not already, following me on social media, on Instagram and on Facebook at This Too Shall Suck podcast. And you can hit my website as well. Learn more about your girl, Lauren Denise, at www.thistooshallsuckpodcast.com. If you love this episode, if it resonated with you, make sure you hit that like button. Let me know, because I know I need to make more videos like that for you. And meet me in the comments. Let's talk about it. I love, love, love talking to y'all. And make sure you definitely hit that little bell, that little subscribe button. Thank you guys as always, and I'll see you on the next episode.